Today we're going to be talking about the CIM Project Suite from CTC Software. We're going to be talking about the corridor tools and workflows that this add-on software allows you to do inside Civil 3D. This is the first in a two-part series, and I will be guiding you through it. My name is Kyle Groves. I am an EIT with ATG USA. I've been out of school and in civil engineering for about 5 years now. I've been with ATG for approximately 2 years. Just had my anniversary last month. So with this, I want to go ahead and jump right into why we would want to even design with corridors in the first place. Hopefully we should all be aware that corridors are a tool that exists in Civil 3D natively, but we want to be using them for a couple of different reasons. First of all, they've got really strong and robust relationships with other Civil 3D objects. And in the case of grading objects, these are stable. Grading objects are particularly unstable and uncanny. And the reason why we'd also want a corridor over just a simple grading object for our final surface is because we can generate a tin surface for any of the design components based off of our subassemblies. That means that if I want a datum surface, I can go ahead and I can generate that through my corridor. I could also find out where the top of my subbase or the top of my base or any of those other surfaces, I can just go ahead and grab those. And again, it's going to be dynamic to all of the data that comprises our corridor. Another really big important reason why we like corridors is because they generate our cross sections for us with a ton of automatic labels. And again, this allows us to cut our sheets before we're completely done with the project, because everything's dynamic. We get our cross sections cut at the 60% phase. We can go back in, we can modify some PVIs, we can change the depth of a few components here and there. Our cross sections are going to update based off of those corridors. So now that we've gone over why we want to use corridors in general, how can we use the CIM Project Suite to help us design better with corridors? The first tool we're going to talk about today is a tool called Assembly Namer. And this is going to help us keep our drawings organized by giving us a quick visual reference inside our model for which assemblies we're looking at. The next tool that we're going to talk about is sort of two, sort of not, but they are corridor splitter and corridor merger. And these are tools that are opposite sides of the same coin. With these tools, this is really going to help us manage our file size, manage how many users can be working on the live design data at a time. And it can also help us manage our project phasing, should that happen to change throughout the course of our project. As the name implies, corridor splitter and merger allows us to take one corridor and chop it up into multiple portions, or we can take multiple corridors and zip them back up into a single corridor with the ability to maintain all of our targeting and all of our parameters. We're just simply breaking or dividing them into one or more objects. Lastly, we've got a tool called Corridor Cleanup. Apologies for that typo, but Corridor Cleanup will quickly reconfigure our targets in our problem areas. So we've all gone through, we've set up our targets, and all of a sudden we realize that something doesn't quite look right. And it can be a really big pain to go through and pick apart that region. If we know what we're supposed to do, and we just want to go back through and get it done, but start from scratch, cleanup is going to allow us to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. When you come back for part 2 in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about a different tool in the CIM Project Suite called Corridor Mapper, which will allow us to dynamically link our targets to a subassembly using AutoCAD layers. So hopefully you guys and gals will enjoy today enough to come back and see me in a few weeks. So with that, let's hop into the software. So here we are in our design scenario. So for this particular project, we're going to be coming in and subdividing this plot of land. Originally, we thought that we were going to do a pretty great design here coming out. We've got a nice big long ring road, chopping it up in half this way, and we've even got a little cul-de-sac over here too. I can see I've got all of my design profiles that I need for my project, as well as my assemblies off here in the bottom right. Now, one of the things I always like to suggest that folks do whenever I'm doing a training on corridors or helping coach firms on this tool set is pick a spot and keep all of your assemblies there. If you're to use the intersection wizard tool, it'll plop them down next to one of your design profiles, which is fine. But I've gone ahead and I've reorganized them over here. And I've also got this giant circle that's going to help me just quickly say, oh, hey, where are my assemblies? They're over here. So checking this out, I can zoom in here and I can get a little bit of information about what I'm trying to do with my design by just visually looking at these. I can see that I've got an assembly with no curb on the right side, but on my left side I do have a curb and a sidewalk and a link. This looks like it might be some sort of curb return, but I'm not really sure what the difference is between these two assemblies. And yeah, the daylight's different over here, but why would I use any of these for a particular part of my design? Well, I could go over to my prospector and check on my assemblies, and this tells me what exists, but it doesn't tell me what it's actually comprised of with that geometry. So that's where the tool assembly namer comes into play. Now, I'll just go ahead and mention this tool is not complicated, but the benefits that it can give to your design are pretty great. So I'm going to run the tool. When you download the tools and install them in your Civil 3D environment, you're going to get a ribbon that's just going to populate up here for the CIM Project Suite, or if you've also decided to try or buy the CIM Manager Suite from CTC, that gets its own ribbon. So with this, we've got a couple of different panels available. And the panels are just telling us what we've got. So the general tools are for either template management or survey management. We've got tools related to the Civil 3D Gravity Pipes Network, corridors, and then these data wizard and sheet generator tools are other tools that kind of work with some custom objects that CTC makes to help unlock brand new workflows, or really just go back and reevaluate other workflows that Autodesk didn't quite make the mark on. So anyway, we're coming up to the project suite. We're going to go grab assembly namer. Once I do that, I'll see my command line is registered to select an assembly, but in this case, I'll just choose them all. And our dialog here is pretty simple. We can select or deselect any of the assemblies that we'd like to name, remove the list, go back and add some more. And then what is going to happen here is we're going to create a piece of M text. And so I'm going to choose my offset. And I'll go ahead and throw this down 10 drawing units below my assembly. And there's a layer assignment that you can choose for that if you wish as well. And once I do, I can see that I now have a mtext object. And if I double click on that mtext object, I actually can see that this is just an AutoCAD field. So if I go in and I double click on this AutoCAD field, I can see that it's just gone through and it's relating itself to the object name. So this is certainly something you can go in and do yourself if you want to, but CTC made this tool free for everybody to go ahead and just put this inside your software. The advantage of this is that once you make any sort of a name change to your assembly, and I'll go ahead and do that through the assembly properties, I'll call this Evergreen Lane, which is conveniently, street, one of the primary design alignments in my drawing. Once I do a drawing regen, the assembly is going to update for me automatically. I'm also going to change a system variable here called field display. Gets rid of that gray background so that we can all see, hey, Evergreen Street. And secondary road full section, all that stuff. So when I come over to my assembly area in my drawing, I don't want to have to cross-reference or check my properties palette or go into my assembly properties to figure out what these are. I just want to see them. I want them to be there. So that's assembly namer and why we want to keep it together. The next tool that we're going to talk about, or pair of tools really, is this corridor splitter and corridor merger. So there are a variety of ways, and I already mentioned them, some of them, but there's a variety of ways where we can get started with our project, get going, and then pick our heads up sometime later and say, ooh, this might not be exactly how I want to do things. And I've been out of school for about 5 years. I'm sure many of the attendees of today's webinar have been in the workforce longer. If I could design things right the first time, I'd be retired by now. And I know that there's folks in here that have been working a lot longer than I have in this industry, and you're not retired yet either. So that's why we're here. We're here to make sure that we can keep our designs as flexible as our project parameters need to be. With the corridor splitter tool, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to grab this corridor, and when I do so, I'm going to get this dialog that's going to come up and just say, hey, here are all my baselines, here are all the regions underneath that baseline. And when I put this corridor together, I knew that it was possible that we could build this in phases. So phase 1 is going to be coming away from our main county road tie-in. We're going to come over, we're going to come down, and we're going to come back out. Phase 2 is going to be the cul-de-sac, and then phase 3 is going to be this ring road going around the outside. And we just got a phone call this morning. Unfortunately, our developer company, they had an investor pull out. They just can't come up with the ability to design this whole thing all at once. Well, that doesn't really affect us from the design team as far as what we're going to worry about, but this drawing is already pretty big. I've got 3 different intersections, a complicated cul-de-sac, a lot of feet in here, and my file is already looking to be about 6 megs. I don't even have a lot of other design info in here, so I want to make sure that I can make this file small enough that I can continue to work with it well, and my drawing performance is going to be positively impacted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take every baseline that's associated with phase 3, and I am going to split that out, and phase 2. So phase 1 is going to be a corridor, phases 2 and 3 are going to be their own corridor. And when I do that, it's going to confirm, hey, here's how many baselines and regions we just found. And now my drawing is going to look like nothing happened. Well, something did happen. I was able to take this single corridor and split it into 2 while maintaining all of my targeting. And once I'm done processing here, I'll come over to my corridors and see that they're now in fact 2. And selecting them in my drawing will confirm that in fact I was able to just do this halfway with the cross street first. And then I've got my cul-de-sac and the other ring road out in their other form. So all of my targeting got maintained. I didn't have to go back in and rebuild the rest of my drawing and do all that targeting all over again, redesign any alignments and profiles and such. It just split my corridor up. Before we go on to zipping this back up, maybe some other opportunities to do this. Maybe we're still going to do everything. We're going to build this whole project. We're going to design it all in one go. But maybe I need multiple designers accessing all of that live data. So by splitting this up, I can now send one of my EITs out to go work on modeling this first half of the corridor. And I can send a different EIT to go work on modeling the second half of the corridor. On Wednesday, when they both finish up, we can zip it back together and keep moving because EIT number 2 got pulled back in on a different project. So when it does come time to zip your corridors back up, it's pretty straightforward. You'll take your corridor to merge, grab A, grab B. It'll tell me that I've got 2 found. And we'll call this Pine Development Merged. Notice right now that I've got Pine Development 1 and 2 currently, and each of those has their own surface. As far as my code sets, I'll just leave that set up to all codes. Now, one thing you do have a choice for is whether or not you want to merge identical baselines. So based on the way that I chopped this up, I actually took Evergreen Street, which was this whole ring road, and I cut it in half. So now it's going to say, do I want to add in that baseline all over again? Or do I want everything that follows that alignment profile to take on to be collected underneath one baseline? That's an option. And usually whenever we're creating a civil 3D object from another, we want to go ahead and delete whatever that previous object was. With this, you can add the surfaces from the old corridors into the new corridor. However, what it's not going to do is actually merge those surfaces. So we can see over here in my prospector that those are put up. I'll go ahead and check both of those, and we will let the tool run and do its magic. Oh, got real nervous there for a second. Usually it doesn't flash like that. But I can come over here, grab my corridor, and now see that it is all one single entity. None of my targeting has been changed. Everything is still finding and building the way that it was supposed to build. So I can come over here, check out my corridor properties. And that Evergreen Street did get zipped all in. That is now one region. And I can see that it's going to be collecting some of those from different portions of my corridor. So again, I could have chosen not to have done that. However, I do have these surfaces that are associated with it, but let's go ahead and turn them on. I'll do phase 1 as a design style. I'll do part 2 as a background style. So these are here, but they are being listed technically as 2 separate surfaces. If I'll just grab one of them and erase. We didn't really need to actually add both of them in, because what a surface is doing is it's just saying, find me all my links, find me all my feature lines, apply the corridor extents as my outer boundary to make that happen. Did see a question just pop up in the chat window. Do your corridors need to be touching in order to be merged? The answer to that is no. So a corridor is functioning off of the principle of a baseline and a region. So wherever your regions and your baselines are, as long as they're being added to the corridor, they can be completely disconnected. You can even have the same baseline with multiple regions. Trying to find a good example here. So like, for example, on this Manchester Road down over here, I can just delete this region if I really wanted to. Rebuild my corridor. And my corridor model is still valid over here. My surface is going to look a little wonky, but I'm still going to be able to see those tin lines connecting. That's kind of an interesting workflow to manage that when your corridor is not connected, but your surface is still talking across those bits. We're not going to get into that today, but no, your corridors, Adam, do not have to be touching in order to merge them, because corridors by themselves don't require that workflow. So this tool isn't doing anything new. We're not doing anything that the software couldn't do already as far as modeling the corridors and such is concerned. It's simply a way to make sure that you can break them apart and put them back together. That is obviously add-on, but the corridor toolset is still functioning purely as designed, as intended. And speaking of another way that we can use the corridor toolset is this whole concept of targeting, right? So when I use a target on my corridor, what I can do is I can say, hey, I've got my typical cross section, but sometimes our cross sections aren't so typical. And I'll come up over here, split my viewports, go check out these areas, and I can see that this intersection down here doesn't quite look right. I've got one of these quadrants is pushing out over to the other side, and if I were to kind of check out these regions a little bit more, I'll go just find the region properties. I can see, yeah, I'm definitely shooting over my center line over here, and yet for this region, I'm not even building out into the roadway at all. Well, if we were to go in and check out some of these targets, right, I've got just the single lane because that's my curb return fillet assembly. But I've got like 3 different targets in here. I'm targeting farthest, well, not nearest. That's kind of backwards, kind of strange. And I could come in here and remove. Okay, back over my profiles. Nope, I didn't want to click that button. That's another escape I gotta press. And just come over here and try to remove all of these, which is fine to do for one region here or there. But if you come in and you decide, you went down, you did your modeling, just gonna undo back there. You did your modeling and you realized that something wasn't quite right. And maybe you've got 2 or 3 levels of conditional subassemblies. Maybe you've got some cut-fill conditional subassemblies behind a horizontal condition. Troubleshooting these assemblies and their modeling can be really tricky. And more than tricky, it's time consuming. I don't like going through and pressing, I don't want to have 30 clicks to get one action out of my software. So this last tool that we're going to talk about is the tool Corridor Cleanup. And as the name implies, what it's going to do is it's going to help us clean up our targeting for our corridor. Now, you can do this at the level of the entire corridor, a specific baseline, or even a specific region within that baseline. You can have the tool zoom or not across all of that, but I know that I've got a couple of different corridors or a couple of different regions that I went ahead and renamed to help me find them later, and they are called Corridor Cleanup 1, 2, and 3. So you can, just like you can choose how much of your corridor you want to go through and sweep out those targets, you can also choose to remove some or all of surface, horizontal, or vertical targeting. So in this case, I don't want to remove my surface target. I know I'm going to get daylight back to existing, but these width and these elevations got all messed up. So I'm going to come back here. It's going to take me way less time to manually retarget these than it will to go through, remove all the targets, and find the targets again. Switch the surface back to no display. Clean up those targets. Yeah, I'll just do the whole darn corridor. We can see these other intersections have gone ahead, they've gotten themselves cleaned out. The bulb over by my cul-de-sac was done. And I can come back through here. Oh, I just need to rebuild my corridor, that's why. So visually, I'm not sure why this isn't updating right now for this particular region. However, if I do go into the target mapping dialog, it's showing me that I don't have any targets set up. So we can really quickly come through here in my left lane. I can grab my Evergreen Street and grab my Manchester lane. I'll add those through. Same thing for my profiles, Evergreen FG, Manchester Center FG. And now that it's found those intersections, we're looking pretty great. Although actually, I didn't want Manchester for that. I wanted its offset subassembly. So again, coming in here doing 1 or 2 at a time, not that big of a deal. And that's actually Manchester right. Which was the wrong one. So again, it's pretty easy to understand how we can get these corridors to go off the rails, but the corridor cleanup tool is there to help make sure that we don't have to spend too much time clicking around and analyzing our drawing, or rather, we don't have to spend our time clicking around through dialog boxes. We can just go back into our drawing and get things done. Which is really the point of Civil 3D in the first place, is we don't have to spend all of our time doing the tedious manual updates. The dynamic relationships make things happen for us. So with that concludes my presentation today, and I want to go back and just remind us some of the things that we learned. First of all, corridors are complicated. The way that the out-of-the-box tools give us to manage them is rarely intuitive, and if it is intuitive or it's possible, it's probably not easy and it's probably not quick. Some of the tools we talked about today are going to help us get through our designs and get through our modeling faster. Assembly Namer is going to allow us to quickly identify our assemblies that exist in the model. We get a quick visual reference that creates a piece of MText that tells us exactly what our assembly is. Corridor Splitter and Corridor Merger allow us to keep our projects flexible. based on any number of concerns that I went over today. And I'm sure there's some more that I haven't even thought about yet for a reason why we would want to take a single corridor and split it up, or take multiple corridors and zip them into one. Lastly, if our targets are misbehaving and we need to go through and troubleshoot our assemblies or our regions, corridor cleanup is a really great way to just hit that reset button and troubleshoot our corridors more effectively. With that, I want to thank everybody for coming today. And also, I'll open up the floor to any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to do so via voice. Otherwise, you can type into the chat window through the Zoom meeting interface. I got a question from Jeff Holmes. Jeff, is this a free add-on? Kind of, part of it is. So the CIM Project Suite is an add-on tool from CTC Software. Licensing for a single seat runs upwards of $550, depending on some other factors. Could probably get a little bit of a deal worked out for that. But these are add-on tools that help the productivity of users inside the software. So the real question that I think we should all be asking ourselves is, how much time would I waste on these workflows that I've talked about today? How much time would I waste on updating a pipe network without that spreadsheet interface inside the software? Not a tool we talked about today, but a tool that is great. However, these tools can be downloaded for a 14-day trial. For full access, any of the light green tools, including Assembly Namer, which is one of the ones that I talked about today, any of these light green tools are free forever for anyone. The dark green tools do require an active license or that 14-day trial window. And so while we're here on the CTC website, do a couple of other things that I wanted to point out for those of us still around. There is a nice little blurb about all of these different tools, as well as a brief video describing the basic functionality of that tool. So anybody can come back in here and check out what it is. If you want, you could even download the sample files one of which I was using today, or otherwise typically those are used in our product demos with individual clients. And another great place to come for resources on this is to go to YouTube for the CTC Software website. They've got all kinds of webinars about getting these things configured, about using them more intelligently, and just kind of why those use cases exist. And I mentioned at some point during the software about proprietary this, that, or the other thing. One of the things that CTC is committed to is to not locking out people from their design data. So if you use any of these tools inside your drawing, and your demo expires, or you decide not to renew your tools at the end of your thing, or you send a file out to a collaborating firm who does not use these tools themselves, nobody will know the difference. You will not be locked out of your tools. Some other add-on tools will write those proprietary objects that are a little too sticky for CTC's taste. Do I have a demo for roundabouts? Not particularly. The roundabout toolset is something that's inside Civil 3D already. You can go hop over to the intersections and create a roundabout. This is a feature that used to be in vehicle tracking, but it's a pretty robust tool. I haven't heard any plans from CTC to address roundabout design with any of their tools in the future. And I'm not sure if ATG has any videos that they've put up for roundabout design assistance. So if I understand your question correctly, how does our tool interface with roundabouts inside the software? If they were designed as a corridor model, our tools they interface with corridors. So if you created something from the intersection wizard, that's a little bit different. Because there's a lot of dynamic data that talk to that. So your actual section where you have your corridor roundabout through the intersection wizard, you'd probably want to leave that alone. But for any of your baselines or your regions that are connected to the roundabout area, you've gone through, you've manually designed your approaches, your straight segments, feel free, I would say, to use these tools on those sections. But that is not something that I've tested. if you'd like, I can try and do a couple of quick tests on that and see what you like. Otherwise, you're also more than welcome to take any of your files, maybe do a save as, download the trial, and see how things work. But that's a great question. I haven't thought about that yet. Generally speaking, inside Civil 3D, if you are creating an object that is a parent object that does a whole bunch of other stuff, like if you use the out-of-the-box intersection wizard to create all of your target and offset objects, you're not supposed to go through and manually modify the curb return alignments, the offset alignments, or any of that stuff. You're actually supposed to go through the intersection object itself and modify those. So just based off of the simple fact of when Civil 3D gives you a specific option to modify something, use the option. Don't go around that with others, with other tools, with other editing operations. It's just like you wouldn't go through a corridor surface and swap 500 triangles. You'd go back and you'd make sure that your design data was added appropriately, or that you maybe are going to add a feature line as a surface break line. So Jeff, if you have any more questions on this, feel free to reach out, send me an email. I would love to keep this discussion going. For the moment, I'm going to move on to see if anybody else has any other questions. Again, I should have given you all the ability to unmute yourself. So feel free to speak up if you would like. Otherwise, continue to chat with me in the chat window. And I'll stick around for as long as people have questions for a good another 10 minutes or so if we keep the discussion going. And again, that contact info is now up again on the screen. Anybody can get a hold of me, kgroves@atgusa.com. All right, not seeing any more questions yet. Stick around for another minute or so, wait for some of those to come in. Otherwise, we may just go ahead and call the webinar for everybody. I want to thank everyone for coming in one more time. It's always great to get out here and spread the word on these tools. These tools were created by users for users. So a lot of these tools were created in partnership with other firms. I know Kimley Horn has participated in the creation of some of these tools. SEH out of Minnesota and the Midwest, Bolton and Menk has helped create some of these tools. So if you have any ideas about how these tools might be able to work or some functionality you'd like to see in the future, CTC wants to hear about it. Any tool that you go and run inside the software, you're going to have an opportunity to click this support button. There's even a button just inside the ribbon for contacting support. In the United States, ATG, my company, is the exclusive reseller. So you're going to type out your information. Always include screenshots, always include as much information as you can for those bug reports, for those feature requests. But if it's a good idea, or if it's something that CTC overlooked, they're going to get it put into their development schedule. And these tools are kind of the culmination of a couple of years worth of effort, but CTC has a lot of programmers on staff, and they're hungry to keep solving the needs of the civil design industry using Civil 3D. So please send that feedback in for what it is you want these to do. Eli Blackhat wants to know about the tool Survey Sweeper. So Survey Sweeper is basically the delete button. That's all right. Survey Sweeper is the delete button that a survey processing tech always wanted. It's a tool that will delete any selected survey points or survey figures out of both the drawing and the survey database. And as a quick reminder, on the ctcsoftware.com website, go up to the products banner, go find your Civil Project Suite. All the tools have their own quick blurb, as well as a quick video explaining what that tool does and the basic use case. Download your 14-day trial. Get in touch with your folks over at your country's local reseller. More than happy to get you all settled up. All right, folks. So with that, I want to say one more big thank you for your time and for your attention today. I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting down. Please reach out to myself or Ms. Sean Prince with any further questions, and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.